This is a story I wrote called MIT Economics PhD Student Kicked Out for Massive Fraud, and you can find it at on my Substack. There's a link to the story in the description of this video. It's about exactly what it sounds like. It's a student at the world's #1 ranked economics PhD program who was caught fabricating research data out of thin air. And I cover dozens or hundreds of research misconduct cases, and lots of them have fabricated data. And this is the most brazen, egregious case of fabricated data that I have come across. So today I'm going to walk you through what happened, how that fraud was uncovered, and what it means for the economics profession. The student's name in this case is Aidan Toner-Rodgers, and he was an economics PhD student at MIT, which is the #1 hardest program to get into in the entire world. Before that, he was a research assistant at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And if you know anything about economics PhD admissions, a very common pathway into the top programs in the world is to work as an RA at the Fed, which is what he did. And 6 months before he was exposed as a fraud, his paper, which was completely fabricated out of thin air, received like this glowing full-page spread and a photo shoot in the Wall Street Journal. And that Wall Street Journal article had a bunch of the top economists in the world praising it as genius. They praised him as genius and his work as genius. And one of those praising him was Darren Acemoglu, who is the #1 top economist in the world. He just won the Nobel Prize last year. And one of the reasons that he might have had an incentive to praise this paper is because this paper cited him like about a dozen times. So despite being only a working paper, Aidan Toner-Rodgers, his paper had already received about 60 citations and was featured in Nature, featured on NPR, featured on Freakonomics, featured in Marginal Revolution. It was cited by the European Central Bank, and even it was cited in the US Congress as proof of AI innovation. So it was a very influential preprint. And we did this whole press tour to promote the paper, and I'm going to play you a clip of him presenting the paper at a research seminar.
We're going to supply that to the model, which has been trained on existing examples. And the model is going to spit out a large set of predicted structures that the scientists can then evaluate and then go and test.
He then did a full hour podcast with The Atlantic, which again is like the most prestigious podcast or publication in the world in liberal media. And I'm going to play you a clip from that.
Like a fair amount of heterogeneity across scientists and their kind of rate of discovery. And I do some tests.
Can you imagine the balls it takes to do this whole press tour, going to all the top outlets in the world, being cited by Congress, and the whole time you know what you're presenting is completely fabricated? It's just crazy to me. I can't even imagine. And his advisors were not participating in the fraud. It was all him. But his advisors did fail to conduct any sort of due diligence. They did not look at the data. They had no questions. So they were promoting a paper that was built on data that did not exist. And so only a few months after publishing the original glowing feature, the Wall Street Journal then published a second article titled "MIT Says It No Longer Stands Behind Its Students' AI Research Paper." And that was when this all blew up. That's when this fraud became public. And the paper, by the way, that was withdrawn was titled "Artificial Intelligence, Scientific Discovery, and Product Innovation." And for this paper, Aidan Toner-Rodgers, what he did was he claimed he worked with material scientists at a company employing roughly 1,800 scientists. And according to the paper, those scientists were given access to a graph of neural networks that Aidan Toner-Rodgers apparently built, which he never ever built in the first place. And what those neural nets that he didn't build purported to show was the AI he built could apparently discover new materials, such as new forms of glass, new forms of alloys, and new forms of plastic. And so because of that discovery that AI could help discover new materials in the field of material science, this study attracted enormous attention because most of the research about artificial intelligence up until this point was focused on its ability to automate repetitive or relatively low skill tasks. And this paper supposedly showed that AI could help highly trained scientists at a top material science company generate new ideas, new discoveries, new prototypes, and patents. This paper actually claimed that his AI that he built led to 44% more materials being discovered, 39% more patents, and 17% more prototypes. And that should have raised red flags or obvious questions because these were amazing results. But the question is, if this neural net helped discover so many more patents, where are all of the patents, right? Patents are public information. So if a system had been generated that dramatically increased the amount of patents that were created, the paper should have been able to identify at least some of those, or like he should have been able to point to some of the new materials or new patents that he discovered. But he was never able to do that. And apparently nobody ever asked. And the larger red flag was actually the company itself. There's only a handful of American companies that employ 1,800 or 1,000 material scientists. And in his paper, where he said he was working with these thousands of scientists, he never identified the company he was working for or with. This whole story began to collapse when a skeptical computer scientist emailed MIT, and MIT launched an investigation. And then, rather than admitting what he did, Aidan Toner-Rodgers doubled down in a spectacular manner because, again, I told you there's only a couple companies this could have been that employed 1,800 material scientists. And one of them is called Corning International, which is an American manufacturer that researches glass and ceramics. So what Aidan Toner-Rodgers did is he created a fake website called Corning Research, which looked like a Corning website, but was totally fake. Again, he made it by himself. And by creating this fake website, he was able to generate documents and emails from fake Corning executives that appeared to come from Corning, but did not really. And so Corning found out, and they brought him to court at the World Intellectual Property Organization, stating that their website had nothing to do with him and their IP had been infringed. And Corning won that case, and at this point, the entire story collapsed. So Aidan Toner-Rodgers spent years pretending to work with scientists. He even went so far as to conduct fake interviews with scientists where he fabricated a transcript of their interviews. But in reality, what was happening is he simply typed numbers into a spreadsheet, pretended those numbers came from a neural net that he never built, and then ran regressions on those numbers and like presented those findings to the world. And the motivation here, I think, is that this paper received a revise and resubmit at the Quarterly Journal of Economics, which is the top economics journal in the world. And one publication in this journal is good enough for tenure at many good schools. So he would have come out of grad school ready to get tenure, basically. But instead, the paper was withdrawn. He was kicked out of MIT, and his professional reputation is basically destroyed forever. It's a very remarkable case, particularly because so many economists and leading journalists and academic institutions accepted the paper without even looking at the data or questioning some very extraordinary claims. And again, I cover this all the details in my Substack article that I wrote about it, which is linked in the description of this video. So again, this is my second YouTube video. I hope it went better than the first, and I'd still like for you to become one of my first subscribers. So hit that subscriber bell. Thank you.